My boss feared my success. One question cost him his job. My name is Roseline, and I worked for a multinational energy company in Alberta. I did not start at the top. I worked hard every single day. I stayed late when others left. I fixed problems others ignored because they were inconvenient or invisible. I learned systems inside out, not for praise, but because excellence felt personal to me. Over time, people noticed. I became known as someone who could land big project contracts, the kind that made the company proud and kept departments funded. Within 5 years, I helped secure 3 major deals. Each one brought in more money than expected and strengthened long-term partnerships. My team trusted me. Clients asked for me by name. I felt useful, steady, and earned. That was when things began to change, quietly at first, almost politely. My boss, Andrew Pike, stopped smiling when I spoke in meetings. He cut me off mid-sentence, questioned details he once approved, and asked me to circle back on work already done. At first, I doubted myself. I told myself he was stressed, that leadership pressure changes people. Then I won Best Employee of the Year. Not once, but twice in a row. The recognition reached higher offices. I could feel it in passing comments and calendar invites. Andrew could feel it too. His tone turned cold. He watched me closely, like success itself offended him. Still, I didn't slip. I kept delivering results, unaware that excellence had made me a threat. Andrew's first move was quiet. Emails requesting reports I had already submitted. When I replied with proof, silence followed. Later, he called me into his office and asked why I was behind. I wasn't. Then came HR meetings. Vague complaints about my attitude. No names, no examples. I asked for facts. None came. I stayed calm and left each meeting intact, but uneasy. Projects were taken from me, then returned after client complaints. Deadlines tightened without logic. I documented everything. That habit, boring, tedious, unglamorous, saved me more than I knew. When the CEO, Oliver Kane, mentioned my name during a company update, I didn't hear it directly, but the building hummed afterward. HR later congratulated me quietly. A special bonus was approved. Months passed. Nothing came. I found the approval document by accident. Signed, authorized, hidden. At the corporate dinner, Andrew seemed nervous. I wore a simple dress and sat quietly. When the CEO raised his glass and asked me if the bonus had been helpful, I answered honestly. "What bonus?" Silence fell hard. Andrew's face drained of colour. The CEO's smile disappeared. Truth had entered the room without permission, and it refused to leave. The next morning, HR and legal joined the meeting. Andrew called it an administrative issue. Emails proved otherwise, requests to pause payment, never shared with me. I presented my records, removals, false complaints, contradictions. Andrew admitted fear of losing his job. The investigation lasted a week. He was placed on leave. The office felt lighter, like pressure released from a sealed room. When the CEO offered me Andrew's position, I asked for time. They said my record had already answered for me. The bonus was paid that day. Every dollar. Taking Andrew's office felt unreal. This wasn't revenge, it was responsibility. I found damage buried deep delays, blocked approvals, silenced people. I told my team the truth. I promised fairness and transparency. Trust returned slowly, then steadily. HR reopened old cases. Bonuses were paid, apologies made. Some people cried. Others stayed quiet. I understood both. Leadership tested me in small ways. I chose clarity over control. The company changed not loudly, but honestly. And when the CEO thanked me for integrity, I understood something at last. Success doesn't protect you. Integrity does. Andrew relied on silence. I relied on truth. And when the moment came, truth was ready. The first real test came quietly. No announcement, no spotlight, just a stalled project and a nervous team waiting to see who I would become. The project had been delayed for weeks before I took over. Under Andrew, delays meant blame. People protected themselves instead of solving problems. I could see it in their posture, tight shoulders, careful words, eyes watching for danger that no longer officially existed. I called a meeting, not a disciplinary one, a working one. We sat around the table with laptops open and coffee going cold. I told them one thing up front. No one was in trouble. The relief was visible. Breathing changed. Someone finally spoke honestly about a supplier issue that had been hidden out of fear. Another admitted a mistake that had snowballed because no one felt safe stopping it early. We broke the problem down piece by piece. No raised voices, no threats, just work. It took long hours and uncomfortable conversations, but the project recovered. The client stayed. More importantly, the team stood taller afterward. Confidence replaced caution. Later that week, HR shared updated survey results. Morale was up. Reporting was up too, and that mattered more. Silence had been replaced with trust. That night, alone in the office, I found an old note in a drawer. My handwriting. Faded ink. Don't let fear change who you are. I realized then that leadership wasn't about proving I deserved the role. It was about proving that the role could be different, and I intended to keep it that way. The regional audit began without drama, which surprised some people. Audits used to arrive like storms, sudden, tense, and defensive. This time, I welcomed it openly. Clear systems protect everyone, especially the quiet ones. The auditors asked detailed questions about approvals, about delays, about authority paths. Old gaps surfaced quickly, remnants of Andrew's leadership. Instead of deflecting, I acknowledged them. We laid out fixes already in progress. That honesty shifted the tone. The auditors stopped probing for blame and started discussing improvement. When they left, one of them said, almost casually, "This department feels different." It did, and for the first time I knew the change was holding. HR shared something unexpected soon after exit reports from Andrew's years. The number of departures stunned me. Good people, quiet people, people who never complained. I asked HR to reach out. Some returned calls cautiously. Some cried. Others were angry. A few said they couldn't come back, that the damage had gone too deep. I respected that. Healing doesn't follow schedules. But some did return. slowly, carefully. And when they did, they watched me closely, not with suspicion, but with hope. That was heavier than any title. Trust given back is fragile. I treated it that way. The next annual corporate dinner arrived faster than expected. This time, I wasn't nervous. I sat beside the CEO. The room felt brighter from that angle, less tense, more human. When the CEO spoke, he didn't tell stories about individuals. He talked about systems, about fairness, about lessons learned the hard way. Then he thanked me, not for results, but for patience. Applause filled the room. I didn't feel proud. I felt grateful. Afterward, several managers spoke to me quietly. Some admitted they had stayed silent before. I didn't judge them. Fear makes people still. What mattered was what came next. Leadership settled into routine, but tests came quietly. A delayed approval, a frustrated manager, a junior employee with a small concern. I treated each one carefully. Rules applied to everyone, including me. When I made mistakes, I owned them. That mattered more than perfection. Late nights still came, but they felt different now. Purpose replaced anxiety. I began mentoring younger staff, teaching them how to document work, speak clearly, and protect their progress. Success should never be hidden. I told them that often, and slowly, I saw fear lose its grip. Months later, HR shared new survey results. Trust was up. Complaints were fewer, but clearer. People felt safer speaking up. That mattered more than any metric. One afternoon, the CEO stopped by and thanked me again, this time for integrity. That word stayed with me. I realized my story wasn't about replacing Andrew. It was about refusing to become him. Fear had shaped his choices. I chose clarity instead. The dinner had revealed the truth. What followed proved it. And the change, real change, had finally taken root. The invitation arrived quietly in my inbox. An industry leadership event, a short talk, a large audience. My first instinct was to decline. Public speaking still unsettled me. I was comfortable in meetings, in systems, in solutions, but standing alone on a stage felt exposed. Then I thought about the younger employees who watched quietly, the ones who reminded me of myself years ago. I accepted. I didn't speak about revenge or conflict. I spoke about preparation, about protecting your work, about how silence can be strength when paired with readiness. The room listened closely, not because the story was dramatic, but because it was familiar. Afterwards, someone said, "Your story feels real." That was enough. Time softened the edges of everything. Andrew's name came up less often, and when it did, it carried no weight. Just a reminder of what unchecked power can do. One morning, HR showed me a report listing how many employees had left during Andrew's leadership. The number sat heavy in my chest. I worked with HR to reach out where we could. Some returned. Some couldn't. Both responses were valid. You can't fix everything, but you can stop the damage from continuing. I no longer feared hidden traps. I understood systems now, how to build them, and how to protect people within them. On the anniversary of the dinner, I walked past the same hall. I paused, remembering the silence, the question, the moment truth met power. Is your bonus okay for you? It had never really been about money. It was about respect, about honesty, about being seen clearly. I kept the old note framed in my office. Don't let fear change who you are. Success didn't shield me. Integrity did. The dinner didn't create my rise. It revealed it. And when the moment came, I answered with nothing more than the truth. That was enough. Years passed, quietly and steadily. The company changed leadership in places, but the systems held. No single signature could stall a future anymore. Transparency became habit, not policy. That was the real win. New hires came in without knowing the old fears. They spoke up easily. They asked questions without glancing over their shoulders. Watching that happen felt better than any title I had earned. I kept mentoring. Not formally, just moments in hallways, emails answered carefully, doors left open. Small choices add up. They always had. Sometimes late in the evening, I looked out over the city lights and thought about timing, about how close everything came to ending differently. One withheld document, one unchecked lie, one unanswered question. But truth doesn't rush. It waits. The dinner wasn't a confrontation. It was a mirror. And once held up, it couldn't be ignored. I didn't rise because someone fell. I rose because I stayed ready when the moment arrived. That lesson stayed with me. Work changed. Life changed. Pressure never disappeared, but fear did, and that was enough. After the epilogue, life didn't pause for meaning. It moved forward the way it always does, through ordinary days, small decisions, and moments no one applauds. New challenges replaced old ones. Markets shifted. Priorities changed. Some projects failed despite best efforts. I learned to accept that leadership isn't about control. It's about response. When things went wrong, people no longer hid. They came forward early. That alone saved months of damage. I noticed something else too. People began protecting each other. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Meetings ended with clearer ownership. Emails carried fewer defensive words. Trust had become practical. Occasionally someone new would ask about my path. I never told the full story unless asked. I focused on what mattered: consistency, documentation, patience, and knowing when to speak. The past no longer haunted the halls. It informed them, and that, I realized, was the truest sign that the story had done its work, not by being remembered loudly, but by no longer needing to be told. One morning, I arrived early and walked the floor before anyone else came in. The lights hummed softly. Desks sat empty, calm, waiting. I realized then that leadership leaves traces even when no one is watching. Processes ran smoothly without intervention. Approvals moved without tension. People trusted the system more than personalities. That was intentional. I had learned that when systems are fair, individuals don't need to fight to be seen. A junior manager stopped me later that day. She said she felt confident making decisions now, without fear of invisible consequences. Her words stayed with me. That confidence was something Andrew never allowed. I thought about legacy. Not titles or recognition, but atmosphere. What people feel when they walk into a room. Fear leaves quietly. Trust stays. And I knew then that whatever came next, this part had been done right. Success began to look different to me. It was no longer the size of a contract or the praise in a meeting. It showed up in quieter ways, projects that moved forward without friction, disagreements resolved without escalation, people taking responsibility without fear of punishment. I watched managers I had once worried about begin to lead with openness. They asked questions instead of issuing commands. They listened longer. They corrected mistakes without humiliation. Change had reached beyond my office. There were still difficult days. Leadership never becomes easy. But the tension felt honest now, not threatening. Problems were challenges, not traps. One afternoon, I reviewed a performance report and paused. The numbers were strong, but what struck me was the language clear, direct, unguarded, no defensiveness, no coded fear. I closed the file and leaned back. This, I realized, was success that lasted. Over time, my story stopped feeling like something that happened to me and started feeling like something that worked through me. New leaders occasionally asked how I handled conflict at the top. I didn't give dramatic answers. I told them I prepared quietly, stayed honest, and let systems speak when people couldn't. Power, I learned, weakens when it's forced to operate in the open. I became careful with my influence. I remembered how easily authority can turn sharp when unchecked. I asked for feedback. I invited disagreement. I made it clear that no one's future depended on my silence. One afternoon, a young employee thanked me not for a decision, but for listening without interrupting. That mattered. Stories fade. Habits remain. If my experience became guidance for others, it wasn't because it was extraordinary. It was because it was repeatable. And that, I knew, was the point. The real test didn't come from above. It came from beside me. A senior manager I trusted began cutting corners, small ones at first, delayed disclosures, selective reporting. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, the kind of behavior that hides in plain sight. Years ago, I might have hesitated. I might have waited, hoping it would correct itself. This time, I didn't. I asked questions, calm ones, documented ones. I gave space for explanation without offering cover. The manager grew uncomfortable. Not angry, uneasy. Transparency does that to people who rely on shadows. When the issue reached HR, it resolved quickly. No spectacle, no damage control, just accountability. Afterward, I sat alone and realized something important. I wasn't reacting out of fear anymore. I was acting out of alignment. That was how I knew the cycle had truly broken. After that test, something settled inside me. Not relief clarity. I understood then that leadership would keep offering moments like this, quieter than the first storm, but just as important. The difference now was that I trusted myself to respond without hesitation or noise. The office continued its rhythm. Projects moved, people advanced. Conflict surfaced and resolved without lingering damage. Nothing dramatic followed, and that was the point. Stability is rarely loud. One afternoon, I reviewed a long-term strategy document and realized how far ahead the team was thinking now. No one was planning around fear. No one was bracing for sabotage. Energy was being spent on growth instead of defense. I closed my laptop and smiled. The proof wasn't in praise or recognition. It was in the absence of fear. And I knew, with quiet certainty, that whatever challenges came next, they would meet a culture strong enough to face them. As calm settled into routine, something unexpected happened. People began to take risks again. Not reckless ones, but thoughtful risks. New ideas surfaced in meetings. Suggestions came from voices that had once stayed quiet. Growth returned, not forced, but natural. I noticed teams experimenting more, learning faster, recovering quicker when things didn't work. Failure no longer carried shame. It carried lessons. That shift mattered deeply. I made space for it on purpose. I protected time for reflection. I encouraged debate without consequence. When someone challenged me respectfully, I thanked them. That alone changed the tone of leadership conversations. One evening, as I prepared to leave, I saw lights still on across the floor, not from fear or pressure, but engagement. People stayed because they cared, not because they were afraid to go. I paused, taking it in. This was what sustainable success looked like. Not urgency, not control, but space to grow, to speak, and to become more than you were yesterday. Eventually, growth stopped feeling like recovery and started feeling normal. New processes no longer needed explanation. People followed them because they worked, not because they were told to. Trust became routine, woven into daily decisions so quietly that no one announced it anymore. I watched new leaders rise confident, thoughtful, unafraid to ask for help. They didn't know the old tension, and that was exactly the point. The past had done its job by staying in the past. Some days were still heavy. Responsibility never disappears, but the weight felt shared now. When problems surfaced, hands went up instead of heads going down. One afternoon, I realized I hadn't checked my old files in months. The emails, the records, the proof I no longer needed them. That was freedom I hadn't expected. Not freedom from work, but from vigilance. The culture could stand on its own now, and I let it. Next, there came a day when I realized I was no longer guarding the past. It happened quietly. A routine meeting ran long, filled with debate and disagreement. Voices overlapped, ideas collided. No one flinched, no one withdrew. When it ended, decisions were clear and ownership was shared. I sat back and felt something unfamiliar ease. For years, I had carried an invisible responsibility to protect what we had built, afraid that without constant attention, it might slip back into old patterns. That day showed me otherwise. The culture no longer depended on me watching every detail. It had roots. I still cared deeply. I still worked hard, but I stopped anticipating threats that no longer existed. I trusted the people. I trusted the systems. Most of all, I trusted myself to step back when needed. Leadership, I learned, isn't holding everything together forever. It's knowing when what you built can stand without you holding it.